Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Two Existential Dudes podcast. Right as we're getting started here, I have something very important to do. If you're not looking at the screen, just watch the screen. Something's gonna happen.
That's nice.
No, isn't that so much nicer?
That's so nice, man. Good job.
It's very subtle, but it's so much nicer now.
It's very nuanced.
Yes, much like the podcast it represents.
Hey, our podcast is just various shades of... That sounds bad. I'm gonna stop that one.
And on that note, relationships.
It's alright. I already have Fatuous Love in here. Don't worry.
Ooh, you have some interesting stuff, don't you?
Luke, for the first time ever, I have drawings in my notes.
You should have told me beforehand. I could have animated them and put them on.
No. You can find them. It was a 37-second Google search for me to find the diagrams I needed. And yet, as you will see, it seems so many individuals, even with these diagrams readily available, fail to recognize the details of them. Much as with society, with so much information available, we fail to recognize our true intellect. And if in most cases only diminish it itself.
We're not talking about that today.
Okay, let's... We're not doing episode 5 again. So first and foremost, it happened again. Luke and I and a friend were having a discussion, and we got into the case about dating, relationships, and other kinds of interactions in a romantic way. And about halfway through it, we realized this is amazing. We need to write this down right now. And we didn't even get the opportunity to finish it because we had to part ways. So this is
I came home and immediately wrote down everything I could remember and just ran with it.
And I'm here to tell you what you forgot.
Yeah.
And you're here to tell me everything I forgot because it's going to be a lot. So first and foremost, the largest part of that discussion we had was our discrepancy in the term dating.
Yes.
Would you care to summarize our difference there?
Would it be better to simply show them? I'm telling you to look at the screen a lot today because we actually have a visual. These are each of our definitions for the word dating. As you can see, I have how do we want to define this dating. So my definition is the process and events through which individual and mutual deliberation is conducted by two individuals on the topic of whether to pursue a long-term relationship. And then I go on to say the long-term relationship, typically and ideally marriage.
Mm-hmm. And then my definition was a state of increased intimacy beyond the commonplace affection of a familiar or friendly relationship. And that's typically measured in the presence and amount of intimate touch and the mutual understanding of a greater plan for the interaction. Now, what I find really interesting in reading the two of these, and I think that we took about an hour to get to last night.
Yeah.
They're very similar, but you can tell immediately yours is a verb while mine's a noun.
Yes.
And that's the immediate
process and state. That's the first thing I noticed.
Immediately. It's a very subtle... Well, it's not a subtle difference. Well... It's a difference that it seems once we have put it now on paper, well, technically screen, it is very clear and blunt.
Yeah.
That it's both different but also extremely similar.
I think it looks more different than we're going to find out that it actually is, as we sort of did yesterday, because our philosophy on this isn't too dissimilar. It's just this definition makes it seem very starkly contrasted.
Yes. And this is a great example for anyone who's ever attempting to do any kind of effective intellectual argument. Define it as accurately and as objectively as possible. This is why both of our definitions are long, and mine's 2 sentences and Luke's is a compound sentence with a additive clause, because we wanted to get every single piece of it.
I also rewrote mine after seeing yours because I wanted it to have just as many big words as yours.
I can throw in some more big words. Okay, I gotta say, I got to the part of mine, beyond the commonplace affection of familiar and then friendly. Is there a better word for friendly? Because it's not friendly as in, like, I'm friendly with you, but our friendly interaction.
Philia?
I wanted to put philia, but it's not exclusively camaraderie.
Yeah.
And that's what really bothered me is, one, I don't like that word very much. But I wanted a big word, I couldn't
I
find
think it's fine when you put it next to familiar.
Okay. Just don't. And read all of these terms as the dictionary definitions. Do not use
Yes.
connotations because we intentionally did so. So first, where do we want to go with this now?
I guess we could start pointing out issues in each other's definitions.
All right, attack me, Luke. Come on.
I think if I had to, it's brilliantly written.
Thank you.
Witten.
Witten.
If
I write well.
If I had to point out anything, it would be the fact that it is a noun makes it seem as though it is the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is
Yes.
what ultimately happens after. It's almost in a way. My definition happens first, and then after that is complete, it leads to your definition. But take your definition slightly further, and it's marriage at that point.
Yes, and that, funnily enough, is one of the points of contention you and I discussed previously, in that... So, in the argument, part of it was the discussion about what point do you declare, to use a very formal and old-fashioned sense, do you declare to your other person that this is now dating, and like establish the fact that you're something greater and that there's a mutual understanding between it? Luke argued on his own right, and it's his own values, so it's fine, that it is better to be more upfront with that almost immediately, while I argued it takes a lot longer to decide before being upfront with it. So then this is where the big difference in our arguments was, and that it was a time difference of how long do you wait before genuinely demonstrating that shared increased affection for each other. And I think this is, you can see it directly here in the definitions, and that yours is an active thing that you do quite quickly out of when seeking an increased relationship, while mine, you can see, is something that comes later, perhaps, after already having a deeper relationship with someone.
Yes. And I think this is why mine is much more of a process, because when it is that, and when you are first starting out with something, it has to be the kind of thing where you're willing to part ways if it's not working. Whereas with your definition, that gets you to a state of a state, a noun. It's a state of almost permanence, or at the very least, something long-lasting.
I will say...
Whereas mine is more of a process to get you there. And that's why I use the word deliberation so prominently.
Yeah. I will say, while I don't entirely agree with your definition itself, I do like the idea of thinking of this dating as an active occupation, as something you don't, once you put the stamp of the title on it, doesn't end the process. I do appreciate that. I think that's a really good way to look at the humanistic side of it, in that you want to increase the relationship as much as possible. While mine, I suppose, might imply that you're trying to increase it, it doesn't necessarily require that by the definition, although I probably should add that in there.
And this is why I would say, and I've got a few, like, I guess we can call them phases of dating that we can get into later.
I was going to do the same thing.
Yeah, well, we can corroborate.
Wait.
Wait.
Corroborate?
Was that the wrong word, or did
Corroborate.
Oh, okay.
There's some R's in there. Did you go to speech therapy? I thought we talked about this.
No.
Did we talk about this? Oh, I'm sorry.
So, my definition... This definition is all-encompassing of every stage of dating, from the first date or interaction up until the potential marriage.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of things included in this.
Mm-hmm.
But the goal at the end of it is that long-term consummate relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And which itself is a process, but that's a different process at that
Right.
point.
It's a more committed process that
Yes,
there's higher stakes in.
And there's no, you don't leave that process.
Mm-hmm.
You are now a unit.
Mm-hmm.
Till death do you part.
Exactly, as the vows go. I presume the reason I disagree in part with your definition is because of that birth of including the different types of it, which I think is so this is gonna sound weird. I disagree with it because it's more accurate. So yes, I like that it includes all those things, but on a personal level, where I hold these stages, perhaps my understanding of a dating stages is your level 3 or 5. So when you provide all of these examples as like the initial step, that on a base level, before we've discussed it a lot, sounds to me like dating is the immediate getting to know them, which I would say it's not. I don't feel you would either. Maybe
I would say it is if it's an intentional. I don't think it should be necessarily, but if you're in a situation where you just met someone, then it would technically be a date if you're only with that person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. I don't know if that's how it should work, because there's some people that swear by, if you become friends with someone first, then it won't work out.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to lead to another discussion later about dating apps and the like.
I'm gonna write it down right now.
Yep.
The theme of season 2.
Not exactly sure where I was going with that. Do I say that enough for that to be a quote? I don't know where I was going with this.
Where was I going? I'm gonna write that down as well. So, yes, the one axiom we both agree upon in regards to dating is that, I think we both explicitly stated, is that it has some future goal to it.
Yes.
There's intent behind it. Dating cannot be an inactive process. And it cannot be...
Yes.
My definition doesn't imply it, but it should imply that it cannot be an inactive state as well.
I have this in my notes. Dating should happen with that greater intent behind it. And I say very explicitly in my notes, anything else should be devalued and labeled under the category of having fun or a fling.
Yes, I would agree. And while talk here, I have the...
Which is, so just to cut in, which is why I think you need that intention going in. I don't think this is I don't think you would support the notion at all, but sometimes it seems like people, they try to date and then they, quote, see what happens, meaning they're not looking for a long-term relationship, but if I find the right person, then maybe. When really you should have the goal of a long-term relationship and then go find the person that will best fill that for you.
And I certainly think I like that you use the word "go find," because, well, in some cases it is a process of finding an individual and helping them increase their capabilities. Sometimes it is a help create that individual, but in both cases you notice they're both creation verbs. It's never a waiting for it to happen, because it won't happen.
No.
That doesn't happen. Love at first sight, by definition, can only be
Lust.
Just in its state, in that it entirely depends on physical appearance and cannot take into account the character aspects of an individual. I suppose it could include things like actions, but it never does in context. And we've discussed many times before that the primary signifier of a genuine, deeper relationship is that complex understanding of the other individual's character on a nuanced level. And I've got the pyramid of love here that we can talk about later, which has those three parts of it, and it's no coincidence that the portion of it that it only includes.
Do you want to talk about it now?
Yeah, we can go ahead and
I think it's a good time.
All right, so it's a triangle. It's also called the love triangle, so sorry about that. They're obviously like a triangle. There's 3 points to it. At the peak of it is the value of liking someone, just on a base level, like enjoying their company. On the right corner, there is commitment, so you're committed to a relationship, even if you don't like them or if you aren't passionate with them. And in the left corner is the passion corner, in that you have passion. And that doesn't
discuss that word.
Right, and that doesn't necessarily imply liking, that doesn't necessarily imply commitment. But the bridges in between are where you get the different points of it. So if it's, from my studies at least, if it's a relationship entirely on liking, it is one of intimacy. And if it's one entirely of commitment, it's empty love. One entirely of passion is infatuation, which seems clearest to them all. And then the middle grounds, and particularly the middle, is where things get really interesting. So something from the top and the bottom right, or commitment and liking.
I wish I could put this up on screen.
You can look it up. It's on Google. There's plenty of them.
What's it called?
Look up the love triangle psychology. It's a humanistic thing, I believe. I want to say it's Maslow, but that might not be right. Some quick Googling.
This is a good, clear one.
That is the exact one I looked up before coming here. Some live editing.
Here, I'll pop it right over. Keep talking.
So, and to further explain it, the bridges are what are the most common actual relationships, in that if it's something where it's liking and commitment, it's companionate love, or intimacy and commitment, and that you're sharing your deepest concerns with someone, and that you're committed to them, but you're not passionate with them. This is exactly what lifelong friends have. And then on the bottom, between infatuation and empty love, there is fatuous love, or fatuous love, I believe it is.
This would probably be the one I'm least familiar with.
Yes, and this one has interesting implications to it, in that you're passionate with someone and you're committed to them, but you don't like them. It's certainly the rarest and gets into the tricky territory of like paying for love, but at that point does it turn into infatuation? But we'll come back to that. On the final side of it, you have the bridge between intimacy and passion, which is romantic love. This is exactly what the case was for Romeo and Juliet, in that it's strict passion and strict intimacy on that immediate level without the long-term commitment yet. And that's also pretty common because it demonstrates a relationship that you like each other and you enjoy your time together, but you aren't necessarily understanding each other on a higher level. And then the middle of the triangle, which includes all three, intimacy, passion, and commitment, is what's called consummate love, and I've mentioned it many times before. And it's the principle of lifelong married couples, in that they love each other intimately, they share private thoughts, and they can be careful with each other, and they're also committed to each other for life, even if there is hardship. And that's the one you really want to strive for. And unfortunately, it seems that in most cases,
romantic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Most cases, you want at least some form of mix of them, because the corners themselves risk wasting your time and just getting shallow relationships that are short term typically.
Where can I put this?
We have a triangle now.
Let's put it.
This is fun to watch him complete this.
Let's put it here.
Hey, that'll work.
That works.
It totally looks bad, but it's fine. So there's the triangle I've been discussing here and all the pieces to it. And this is something, it's really a simple concept, but it's a great thing to just understand in its essence. What are you doing?
I'm trying. I'm sorry, I'm trying. But yes, this is perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. I wasn't very familiar with this.
No, I believe it's Maslow, but don't take my absolute word on that. But it's certainly something of the humanistic psychological route. And I bring this up to demonstrate, and I mentioned it before, just as we were talking about how relationships have to be directional in some fashion.
Mm-hmm.
I bring this triangle in to say that the 3 points of it are never stationary, both for good and for bad. Sometimes they're increasing, sometimes they're decreasing, and sometimes they're going all different directions at the same time. Sometimes just one, and depending on the relationship, you have all or none of them. And this is
Is there?
This is important.
Would the relationship with none of them be a thing? Would this simply be transactional?
Well, a relationship with none of them would be, because even an acquaintance would be liking, so it would be a stranger.
Well, just for theoretical purposes, wouldn't a relationship with none of them be like a business relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's
entirely void of any form of emotion towards the other person. And it's supposed to be. It never is.
Yeah.
Because you will almost always end up in the liking, perhaps even commitment category. In some cases, the passion category. But it's not
the insider business world.
Yes, it's not supposed to end in all of those. That's why business relationships are not a thing, or not supposed to be a thing usually. But just as in any dating relationship, you have to be constantly evaluating it and trying to figure out what can you take next. You have to be taking into these 3 points of the triangle into account. Because just as with all things in the world, order always goes to chaos. So if you leave it to sit, these will diminish in their quality and you'll lose control of which ones you value the most.
Mm-hmm.
And for everyone, the 3 points of it will have different levels of value. And even between individuals in a couple, you will never have the same absolute agreement. But what matters is that you're similar enough to appreciate the other person's side of it. And this is where we get into the love languages, in being able to express the other person's love language to them, to show that you care, and makes a big cycle.
So I guess at this point we should offer a critique of specifically the top left part of the triangle. That one.
Oh, romantic love.
Yeah.
Why'd you take the triangle down?
Because it looks bad up there.
It doesn't matter. Can you put like a background behind it?
Okay, yes, I can do this.
Alright, folks, we're gonna watch him do this again and laugh when he messes it up.
No. I got this.
Let's watch him scroll through the folder of all of our thumbnails. And in the meantime, I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Literally no one. So, thanks to them. Or I guess thanks to no one, because they still don't provide us with anything. But they are not nice, nor are they poor to us, and therefore it doesn't matter. But certainly, don't patronize our sponsors of no one.
Okay, that's the best I can do.
But if you would like to help sponsor the show, we have some t-shirts available.
Yes.
They're a great deal, great comfort. I'm not wearing mine right now. I should be.
Okay.
Where were we?
I was about to critique dating for fun or dating for happiness or dating to be happy temporarily. And I was going to say that dating in order to have fun or for happiness, temporary at least, is really not that dissimilar from dating for sex. Because in both cases, it's essentially transactional, because the only value is the only thing valued in those type of relationships, especially sex, is consent, and none of the points of the triangle are factored into it, the decision. But even when it doesn't pertain to sex, it's still just trading time for some surface level enjoyment with someone. Which, to use our definitions, that's not dating, that's a friendship with high levels of intimacy.
I believe you're looking for the term friends with benefits.
Yes.
That's exactly. Funnily enough, that works well with our definitions. Weird.
Yeah.
Almost like they're designed to work that way. So, I partly agree with you, or partly disagree with you, in that it's important that you mention that romantic love, being passion and intimacy itself, has to be temporary because it lacks the commitment element of it.
Yeah.
Assuming a textbook example of only passion and intimacy, no commitment at all. That would be the case of two work friends who like each other as friends and are cool with each other and decide to have some fun on top of it. They're not committed to each other at all, but it's a romantic love at that point because there is the intimacy of it between the two of them, as compared to going out and finding someone to have passionate acts with, which lacks even the intimacy of it because you don't know them at all and you don't necessarily like them entirely. So, and the reason I partly disagree is because on one hand, I almost feel that depending on how you define it, romantic love isn't bad. Because using the example I just gave, it definitely is something that's negative to your character and doesn't have the dating aspect of it, of the time garnered and the clear goal that you're trying to get to, or at least the clear idea of what you're trying to get to. But on the other hand, romantic love could be something because it has that intimacy, the first step beyond general intimacy, which then hopefully, I suppose, while that's not the route I would take, it would lead you into that greater commitment through the act itself.
The thing with that is psychology and the weird things that sex does to the human brain, in that people don't think clearly under those situations.
Well, is it not the typical case of you like them a little, you have sex with them more and more, and then you decide to get married? Isn't that... Well, that's not the route I don't think either of us would take. I think that tends to be the typical route.
Yes, but the thing is, you're getting married because you had sex. And... and none of the other deliberation was able to happen because your judgment was so clouded by the lust or passion.
Not necessarily, and I'll use literature examples here. A very common trope in the novels from the World Wars, particularly American authors, is to have soldiers fall in love with women for sale.
Mm-hmm.
And in the cases that I've read, and the stories that I've been told of, it often seems that. Okay, let me start this from the beginning then. The situation goes that they like each other a little, or they don't at all, and then the soldier goes and finds this woman, and they have their intimate actions, and then in every case that I've read, they've always typically immediately after the act, it's always been a discussion of intimacy and commitment. Fascinatingly enough, which is why I see what you're coming at from in saying that they're getting married perhaps entirely out of guilt, and in some cases out of guilt for a child. But my argument here is that in doing so, it forces them, yes, to be closer and consider the commitment. But the commitment in itself is still a decision. And that decision is taken both ways. This is why there are children who grow up without fathers and mothers.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of them leaves because they're not committed to it. When in many cases that you see, yes, particularly through the appearance of a child, the commitment grows out of, yes, guilt, but hopefully in each other. In an ideal case, I suppose.
Mm. I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree on that one.
No, you're not allowed to disagree with me, Luke. You have to agree with me.
Well, I just did.
Wait. No, wait, hey! Dang it. Alright, what now?
I don't know.
Should a relationship always be pursuing increased intimacy?
Are you talking about what kind of relationship? A dating relationship?
I'll let you decide.
Yes, if the deliberation is sound.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that if the I guess values is the best term, if they match up. I keep wanting to use better words, but I don't have them. Or if they match up, or at the very least are reconcilable, then yes, probably.
Now, I would ask, in order to have a at least liking relationship and perhaps committed relationship, must the values align or directly complement? Or can they be disjointed together? I'm sorry, I keep throwing like really hard questions at you.
Yeah, you do. I guess it would depend on... I'd have to have an example for this. My inclination is to say yes, but I know if I say yes, you're going to throw something at me.
I have no idea where this is going. I'm just testing these
Okay,
questions.
well then I'll say yes, unsubstantiated, and hope that stands.
Unsubstantiated? No. What are you, a politician?
Hope I don't get called out on it.
Yeah. All right.
Well, if you can agree on what's important, especially in a relationship, then what's the point of getting involved with someone who doesn't share that view? Or if you're looking at it from a how to raise children, a parent's perspective, why why would I get involved with someone who has completely different ideals on how to raise children?
But can you be close with someone even if they disagree with you on everything?
Let's take the absolutism out of this. I don't know about everything, because
Everything might be too
disagreeing on everything is a very absurd notion.
I disagree exactly with everything you just said, and your word choice, and your syntax.
But you can be intimate, I get. How are we defining intimacy? We never did that. And I'm still not completely there on it.
So
you are not making this easy.
Intimacy, in my definition, I tried to suggest it with the idea of intimate touch, and I know I just used the word to define it, but intimacy, as I see it, is feeling comfortable to express opinions that you wouldn't necessarily express. Furthermore, express physical touch that you wouldn't necessarily express.
So it's comfort, almost.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Things you can confide in. So the best example of this is perhaps like a lifelong friend, or even perhaps like a psychologist that you trust deeply, being able to give your darkest, deepest secrets to them and be okay with that.
So it's comfort, both physical and emotional.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. On the highest degree.
Yes.
There's another humanistic scale diagram of these levels of it, but I don't have that one on hand, nor do I know what it looks like. But the purpose of that one is to display the increasing levels of intimacy.
So then, no. I would say absolutely not to that one. You shouldn't or can't be intimate with those you share radical differences in values.
But do not sometimes those radical differences force you to reflect upon your own self even greater, and perhaps find it a solution to your case that you hadn't even considered or even thought of as an idea?
Maybe in theory.
Because this is where we get into the case of like...
Maybe in theory, but...
Of like, is the best debate...
I've never confided in anyone...
that you hate.
And gotten good results
mm-hmm.
from someone that I've shared deep things with.
Would you say it's...
If I do with someone that I share vast differences with, it doesn't usually go well.
Would you say the case is that because they disagree with you so widely, and this is going to be a long thesis, all right, here we go. Because they disagree with you so widely, and unfortunately in our contemporary world, disagreement means you must prove that I'm better. Disagreement and winning of debates necessarily by the system by which we live in equates to value of an individual. They take it as an opportunity to put you down, I suppose.
Maybe subconsciously. Or maybe intentionally if they're really malicious.
Yeah, because I have certainly experienced a similar thing, and you've told me of experiences of a similar thing, in that it's someone degrading you on the most malicious level if it's intentful. Is that anti-dating if it's intentful maliciousness? Or is that just being mean? Definitions.
Stop.
Asking hypotheticals that
not every word has, not every concept has to have an antithesis.
Excuse me, it's antithesis.
No,
antithesis.
You say antithetical.
Antithesis. Antithetical.
Antithetical.
That sounds like antithetical. I hate that. Antithesis. That is a really fun word because it makes you sound so smart, but it's really a really straightforward idea. Just like nevertheless. All right, where are we now?
Good question.
If anyone's still here,
At 0 viewers,
hey,
apparently.
they're not. I think that's a fair place to cut it.
Really?
Yeah. Do you have, unless you have any suggested ideas?
I mean, I had quite a few more things actually.
Oh, sorry. Go on to those.
We could get into the phases,
The phases. I forgot about the phase.
Yeah, this whole episode is called The Process.
Oh yes, the title I
We
gave.
we talked about the bare ideals of what you should do, but none of the specifics of how that actually works.
Why were you letting that? You were like giving so much delay. Why wouldn't you like go lead with one of those? I'm sitting there like, wow. I guess that's neither of us have ideas for this part. I guess that's it. You've got another page. So Luke, what are your processes?
The thing is, I'm not done.
Have you been trying to be? You're like a student doing your homework in class. Except I don't grade you. Subconsciously, I do.
They grade me with their views, which at this point is none.
Well, let's go into those processes. Processes?
The first one, which I dubbed phase 0, is initial interest. Usually indiscernible from physical attraction, or in some cases friendship, where you just suddenly find yourself liking a person.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually not something you've thought about very much. It just kind of happens. Mm-hmm. Which,
friend by consequence.
Yeah, you can't. As much as we like to make this all completely logical, the logic comes later. This step is not that. It's very baser instincts.
It is a roll of the cosmic die as to who you will meet and to when you will meet them and if you will like them at that time or not. Because there are cases where people meet people, hate them, and then meet them later and they're great, which is the exact case of us, which I've mentioned before. Yes, our loyal fan base of 0. Yes. I disliked Luke.
Someone's here. Someone's here.
Welcome. Welcome.
We should not get this excited. Stage 1, which I dubbed the learning phase, and to make this neutral to each of our definitions, I said you can learn about the other person either through friendship or dating, and this would most readily necessitate figuring out the other person's beliefs and values, but also things like interests and aspirations as well.
Mm-hmm. Getting to know them.
And then once you get deeper into that, it becomes. I almost wanted to put in another one called understanding, which would be more applying that knowledge to the specific pair of individuals and figuring out how that could be compatible.
Okay.
And then I stop. I don't have anything after that.
Alright, so let's work through them real time here. Let's, from logic, build where we want to go. So, initially you have that level of... Gotta flip to a new page. You have the level of... We'll go with unknown, if I can spell it, in that you don't necessarily know them yet, and that perhaps you like them as an individual, perhaps you don't, but it's the beginning of the whole process. Would you agree on that?
Yes.
Yeah. And then you move on to let's say getting to know them. So, wow, I cannot spell today. That looks great. In that you're getting to know them on a greater level, perhaps on a deeper level, not necessarily on a extreme deep level and an intimate level yet, but the intimacy between not knowing them and knowing something about them is much higher.
These would have been much easier to make if I had understood the concept of intimacy 2 hours ago.
They're there. So then after that...
Let's call the next one the intimacy level.
Intimacy. So we'll call this...
Emotional intimacy?
I was going to say the boys.
What?
Yes. Although that... I have my reasoning, but it doesn't necessarily work in this context, so we won't do it now. We'll come back to that concept, though. That's a fun discussion about what that means. And if you don't know what that means, I'm sorry. So let's go with this next level being understanding. At this point, you know them on a greater level. You enjoy your time with them, and you understand their character on a higher level. And all these imply, as we go up, you're increasing your liking of the individual. I don't have to write that because it's implied. Next up, what comes next in that process?
So at level 2 understanding, is that emotional intimacy? Sorry, I know you just described it.
So I'm thinking for number 3, safety. Because understanding, yes, you're getting to like them more, and yes, you know about perhaps some of their deep thoughts and how they value certain things, but you don't necessarily help them on a high level yet, nor do they necessarily help you or discuss it with you. So I'm considering calling this next 3rd level safety, in that the other person and perhaps you can feel safe confining these dark issues in the other person. Not all of them necessarily, but the ones you would not give to an unknown, nor to a getting to know, nor even maybe not to an understanding individual. Because there's something past... And I see where you're coming from now. And do we want to make it emotional intimacy versus physical intimacy? And this is where we're gonna, I feel, defer again, in that I wouldn't say we're not even to physical intimacy.
Well, I would say emotional comes before physical.
Absolutely, yeah. So, how do you like safety as an idea?
Sure.
All right, we'll go with that.
I'll go with that.
Level 3, safety.
See, this is the thing. You have a lot more steps, whereas mine are more like bulk concepts. About...
I guess this is me describing my process, which I've never done before until right now.
Never.
Whoa. Whoa.
Never.
I think the next stage is called in hesitation. In being the counter prefix here, in that you are not hesitant at all when discussing things. Because perhaps safety... They feel arbitrary.
It seems like you're breaking it up a bit too much.
Okay. You assume all these are like a year long. They don't have to be.
Okay, that's the thing, because mine were in block...
I should really think this through tonight. I have never done this.
Yes. Then we can compare some other time.
And then I suppose after in hesitation also implies that they're the first person you would go to with any issue. Which I feel the next step to that would be, if you're not already dating, which would probably be level 2 or 3, the next step to this would probably be engagement.
Meaning...
Romantic, yes, actual romantic engagement.
Okay.
He just did like the gesture with his hands. You know? Yeah, okay. You seem at war over there.
With myself, yes. I'm more just confused because I feel like there needs to be a step somewhere in between here that involves definitionally defining something as a relationship. On the maybe that would come during understanding, because it is understood the intention behind the interactions in the relationship.
Yes, I think I would agree. Either understanding or probably understanding, but maybe safety if it's a late one. I think this simple 5-step, 6-step, because it has level 0 process, as notated here, describes that you're implying a shared understanding of that.
Okay.
Which we decided upon earlier, at least to take as an axiom. Well, I'll probably do some more thinking upon it. It is necessary to express that intent to the other person, if not to further the relationship, at the very least, so that they know what to expect out of it. It's like reading a course syllabi.
And honestly, some of my opinions on this issue, much more than others, are influenced by practicality rather than some sort of principled.
Yes, my system's incredibly impractical.
Than some sort of principled understanding of every aspect of this.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I think it would be incredibly disheartening to go through all of this and have them just think of you as a friend by stage 4. Like, because theoretically you could have most of these stages with a close friend.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I think there needs to be a definition.
Maybe the next step is after 4. After in hesitation. Although that feels too late at that point, because
Well, I don't. It depends on the time frame of all of these.
Right, and depending on who you ask.
Because if these are like a few months or a few weeks or something, then
right,
as opposed to some of them being years.
And depending on who you ask, like the idea of seeking a romantic late relationship can come prior to the understanding of it, as we suggested, in that that romantic relationship might encourage further commitment. But at the same time, there's others who would say that the commitment's necessary to agree upon that. Because I have certainly seen in my experience, and you have too, and you know exactly who I'm thinking of an individual who has gone through all 4 of these stages and then realized the other person is on stage -1.
You're gonna have to.
I'll tell you later.
Clue me in later.
I'll tell you later. But you know who you know. But this is fascinating because I think this is where we differ.
Does our difference go back to what I was saying about you having to have that squarely in your mind that you are looking for a relationship, and like a long-term relationship, and 2 people have to know that going in? Are you making the argument that it should eventually just kind of happen somewhere along the line?
2 days it took you to finally get where I'm thinking. It also took me 2 days to figure out what I was trying to say as well. Yes. While I agree that you should be upfront with someone about intimate thoughts, or at least intimate opinions of them, my system implies that by in hesitation, that's just the natural result of it. Because yes, I feel it's respectful and probably more realistic to demonstrate early on to this person how you feel in a closer thought of them. But in my, perhaps entirely theoretical system, it is the result of getting to know them that you realize you want to seek that final step. Because I think all right, here we go. and that's coming together now. This is why your definitions of verb and mind's a noun. Because yours is implying steps 2 through 5, or 2 through 4, or even past it, is a process of getting to that higher level. While mine is by stage 4, you flip the state and become a dating couple. And then engage and so on. That's crazy. It came all back together.
So where in this diagram that you have does chance become intention?
Personally, somewhere in step 4 in hesitation. Depending on the day, I'd probably say the beginning or the end.
Okay.
Because the beginning of that is you're starting to realize. Through my notebook. You're starting to realize that you don't wait at all to refer to that person, while the end of it is constantly being aware of them, thinking of them, and thinking how they would react to something and how they might help you in a situation. And I have probably not seen a stage 4 in my life, which is why this is, as you've said many times before, my system's probably not practical at all. But this is, I think, the way it would lay out.
So does stage 4 exist?
Yes. And this is where your definition, I think, is the realistic position of it, because in most real relationships, dating, and in some cases marriage, would occur in stages 1 and 2, getting to know them and understanding in most relationships. Because getting to know them implies getting to know them, if you catch my drift. And that might be the only part of it, and then the understanding is the commitment element of it later.
Okay, I wasn't advocating for that.
No, I know you're not, but I'm describing how your system, the evidence of the world proves your system works.
Okay.
Okay.
You are very much devaluing my definition.
I know what I'm saying.
Did you read my definition?
I did read your definition. I know what I'm saying. Don't worry. And I don't mean to devalue it, but it's the consequence of it. I say this because in most real situations, dating and sometimes marriage occurs in stages 1 and 2, and then if they don't divorce, which is common in those cases, 3, 4, and, stages 3 and maybe 4 occur in marriage couples, most commonly. Because you can confide entirely in them by that point. And I don't mean to say that, your system only works for quick hookups that result in accidental marriages, which is exactly what I just said it did. Which it isn't. I mean to say that your system is more realistic because it suggests that all of these steps don't have to happen before establishing something greater or beginning to demonstrate something. Read your definition again. Go ahead.
The process and events through which individual and mutual deliberation is conducted by two individuals on the topic of whether to pursue a long-term relationship. Meaning it is a conscious process that you do both in your mind and then later with the other person to determine that should happen.
Wait.
Why isn't...
Wait. So, by saying, does that not suggest that dating is a long-term process? Because if dating is the deliberation that precedes that process, that's just getting to know them and or understanding for me.
Well, I use long-term relationship as a substitute for marriage.
Okay. That, I was going to say, that wouldn't work.
Dating in itself does not this isn't meant to imply that dating is a short process and then right after you get married. I deliberately made the definition encompass as much of the process as I could.
Okay, thank you. That makes more sense. But yes,
So in an ideal scenario, stages 1 through 4 would all be covered under this.
I would put, using your definition, I would put the beginning of dating between 1 and 2, maybe between 2 and 3. But yes, I agree. The process, this process is, and as I circle the numbers, is the idea of dating. At least in your definition. Well, I would say this precedes a relationship, which would occur here between inhesitation and engagement. I think personally I would put the beginning of dating prior to understanding, because that suggests, by your definition at least, that you're, well, not even by your definition, but just in general, that you're wanting to get to know them at a higher level. Perhaps somewhere in understanding is the idea.
As you said before, the difference between our two definitions is that these processes, specifically steps 2, 3, and 4, are deliberate in my definition and coincidental in your definition.
Can they be deliberate? You can certainly deliberately increase your understanding of an individual, and that would probably result in safety, but I don't see how inhesitation couldn't be deliberate. To me, that feels like inhesitation. So the reason I differentiate between safety and inhesitation is that safety is the logical understanding that you can go to them with something. Inhesitation is the abstract one, the instinctual. That's the first person I think of. Thus, I don't think you could make that occur directly. It would have to be indirectly entirely.
I think you're also assuming that in my definition, I would say dating is, as much as it is a process of trying to form that relationship, it's deliberating when that process is not necessary or appropriate. With whom should I not become intimate with? And that's where, like, in an ideal situation, if everything goes right, the process in these two that you take trying to get to know them, being around them more generally in some cases, that will get you to there if things align the right way, if there's enough compatibility.
I think this is the in-between between our two ideas of dating. Because yours, initially at least, was the idea of all of these steps are dating, while mine was none of the steps are dating. And now we're kind of to some of the steps, depending on how you look at it. And some of the steps are dating, some of the steps are included in dating but aren't dating. That's really fascinating. I will definitely have to consider that more. That was a delicious argument. Thank you.
Yes.
It was scrumptious. Now what?
I don't know.
Do you have any further juxtapositions?
We could do a lightning round.
A lightning round? What does that mean in this context?
Just I fire a bunch of questions your way that are much less deep than the ones you gave me earlier. Those were difficult.
I'm sorry. I was trying to prompt like a discussion, and then you went, what? So what are these questions you would like to prompt? I'm down for lightning round.
In the description I wrote, debate the rigidity of timeframes in dating. Meaning, how long do these steps take? Is there a set time? Is there an ideal time?
No. Every time I describe this long-term process, I use the term long-term to imply that it takes probably more than a year or two to go through all 4 steps. But a lot of people see it as like you need to be dating for 3 years. Not necessarily. Because really steps 0 through 2 are just getting to know them as a friend and can include things like childhood school. And that can be 10 years of public education. That can be 4 months of college. That can be 6 years of working at a job. And then the last 3 can carry out in a very short period, or they can carry out in a very long period. And I say that the reason I use long term is to say I don't want any of these to be doubtable. In other words, I don't want to have to go back a step.
Yeah.
To use the legal phrase, it's going to sound like I'm a textbook, I must have unreasonable doubt that is ready to move on. And this is where a point of contention came between the two of us, in that before we knew what dating was in our definitions, I presume your dating was immediate, like you just decided on the spot and you start with it, which obviously it isn't. But I took that as, no, that dating should be something you've been considering for a while. And then you apply it. Which it seems your point is.
Yes. The only correction I would make is that it's, in my definition of dating, it's understood from the outset that it might not go anywhere. And it could fizzle out very quickly and be nothing. And because initially there's no physical intimacy, it's very easy to do that, to see logically this is or isn't progressing somewhere.
And that is the exact thing my system, at least in thought, would try to avoid. That's why the dating level of it would come very late in the stages, in order to have the highest level of certainty without being disrespectful to the individual. I love how we talk about this. Like, we didn't even talk about like the other person in the relationship, how they're part of this.
Well, that's why my definition said mutual.
Mine said common understanding. Actually, I think they both said mutual.
Wait. Oh, I forgot to correct this. I corrected one of them, but not the other one.
You make me look dumb. How dare you? Tisk, tisk.
Because the idea is, maybe to read a little more into my definition, the individual deliberation, that is what your process that you described is. That's before dating. Whereas I might include that in dating, maybe. I might have to go back on that, but I don't know. And whereas the mutual deliberation, that kind of coincides with your definition of dating, because there's it's mutually understood that there's intent behind this.
And certainly, the longer we go with this, probably the earlier I keep moving the dating stage.
And the later I keep...
And yeah, we're just evening out. But I bring that up to say, safety as a level is the point at which you can confine those things, and one of those things might be, is this something that we want to take further? And that's where the mutual discussion comes into it. Because at that point, really, you're not hiding those thoughts from the other person, so they probably already know. It's a matter of, have you taken the step with them, or have that discussion.
You would say that if they weren't on the same train of thought, if they weren't thinking the same way, then they wouldn't allow it to get that far.
Oh, yeah.
Later in the stages.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because in the same way that if you're only a stage 1 getting to know them, or even a stage 0, there's no commitment there at all. There's no reason to at least stay, and they don't necessarily even like you. But hopefully by stages 3 and 4, they like you as a friend, and they're comfortable with you and intimate with you, and there's commitment to the friendship at least. And then you bring in the passionate element of it.
One of the practical issues that I think I see with this.
There's a lot of practical issues. We've been over this.
But one of them is people today seem to be so bad at communication, and they like to think of themselves as nice, that they will allow it to get that far even if they do not like the person. And then eventually it will just get to a point where they fade out, and this is where you get what's called ghosting, which is where one person thinks something's going really well, but then the other person basically drops off from their life. And at no point in that process is there ever a clear distinction made that no, this isn't happening. And I think that's important. As much as it is important in a successful relationship, it is equally as important in one that's not going to go anywhere.
So there's two parts to this. If you don't like the individual, you will never get past understanding. Because if you don't like them, you'll never feel safe in them.
No. But the other person could feel.
Here's the second part of it. One person can get to stage 5, engagement with the other person, and the other person can be on the beginning of stage 2, and not see it going anywhere. That is certainly the case, and that's.
It took us an hour to start talking about the other person.
Nice.
This should tell you how narcissistic we are.
I love it. So here's again the difference in your solution to this issue is being upfront with it earlier on, probably in understanding or maybe in getting to know them, in order to demonstrate, is this something you may pursue as well. While mine is perhaps betting upon, if I'm at this stage and I understand and am hesitant with you and can trust you, I should know how you think about it.
Okay.
But I don't necessarily.
Okay.
He's smiling.
The fault I see with this is that not everyone is you and capable of such great feats of intellect.
I feel both flattered and kind of insulted.
You see what I'm saying, though?
Yes, and
in the way so many people can be blinded by, quote, love.
Oh, that's a stupid phrase.
In the way so many people experience that, they don't exactly think through this process, and they, in some cases, need a definitive defining of terms, so to say.
Yes, that definitely is the case. I will say, if I'm on stages 3 and 4 with someone, that probably means I can share that level with them. This sounds so narcissistic. I hate it. You put me in this corner. Like corner of flattery. But that definitely would be the issue. And that's where yours, again, has strength. This is just both of us arguing in favor of the other person's definition. You want to trade?
Okay.
I'll give you my notebook. I'll take yours. Yeah.
We've talked a lot about We haven't talked hardly at all about what happens when we get to your definition of dating. This whole time we've been in my realm of the very beginning of dating and your realm of
Pre-date.
right before dating. But we haven't got
we haven't we're doing relationships and we haven't even talked about an actual relationship yet, other than in interaction. This is great. So I see why your definition is the progression of dating, including these steps, or my steps. Because it's very clear that even in what I wrote here, stage 5, the last step, is engagement. Which seems to suggest that that is the end of the dating process. And when we talked about where I would put dating, I kind of shoved it between 4 and 5 with little font.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be the case of dating is the situation where you're getting to know them on a higher level. Because when you ask, what is my dating then, if this has all been the beginning, ahead of it, my initial response would be getting even closer with them. But if you're at the level of inhesitation, there are very limited places to go with.
And
which would then make dating very short, which is exactly contrary to what I've been saying before.
Mm-hmm. That's almost why I kept wanting to push it forward because I saw that there and I thought, well, there's nothing really after that, so
that's it.
In this process, dating isn't really a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Completely. So that's interesting. You noticed that in your definition, dating is getting shorter than you thought it was.
This is that's exactly contrary to what I would normally suggest it should be, a longer process, because it implies the progression of events. Fascinating. So I don't think I'd push it as far forward as yours. Okay. I think I would still place it after understanding. Maybe in understanding, but probably not.
Okay.
Yes, because safety and inhesitation imply the highest levels of intimacy before physical touch is involved.
Mm-hmm.
Which would be dating. Which would be dating and eventually engagement in marriage for increased physical touch. This is something I will have to deliberate.
Yeah.
This is really good. I like this. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out.
Part 2 tomorrow?
I'm so glad I got to share my Tuesdays with the intellectual titan that is Luke before me. Both insulting and admiring my intellect, while also making me feel like an absolute jerk.
So then what is... You didn't answer the question. What is dating then?
I answered the question. The answer to the question is that I'm really not sure. Because if I don't push it forward, dating must be short, and it must be, honestly, a small increase in intimacy.
At that point, there's really no reason for dating to be long.
No.
Because
this definition implies no dating, honestly. It implies you go directly from being friends to engagement. But does that suggest that increasing your levels of friendship must suggest dating? Is dating then not a single event that starts as a title, but rather an idea that gradually emerges and just happens? Instead of telling your friends that you started dating, it just begins to become assumed. because they know the two of
Well-
you have reached such a level of understanding and intimacy that it just gradually, as you come closer together, becomes a relationship without even you having to take the initial step.
Yeah, I guess this is where the definition of the word date, not dating, but date comes in. Because I actually looked it up because we had some disagreement on this yesterday.
We did.
And
I made a really funny analogy.
Google is a social or romantic appointment or engagement.
Appointment. I guess meet me at 7 o'clock for our romantic appointment.
So, the word social, I think that's what I was saying, where, like, in the past, date didn't necessarily imply romantic engagement.
No, I think it must.
Then why does this have social?
Well, okay, look. Are we taking romantic as lacking commitment?
Ooh.
Because if commitment is involved, then yes, a date would be any kind of social and romantic event. But if romantic excludes commitment, it doesn't necessarily.
I don't think dating implies commitment. By definition, why would it exist if it applies commitment? Isn't that just marriage at that point?
No, not necessarily.
What's the distinction?
So, you look at the difference between how multiple people would go on a date. Some, such as a blind date, there's absolutely no commitment. There isn't necessarily. The only thing that results in liking or romantic elements of it, passionate elements of it, or the conclusion of it. There is no to it. Conversely, a married couple can go on a date, which is should be consummate, and include all of them before it, and hopefully expand upon them. So, I would argue a date doesn't carry any weight as itself. Rather, it is a tool through which individuals can attempt to increase intimacy between them.
Okay. I like that definition.
I didn't know where I was going, but we got there eventually.
We did get there. And I followed every word because you talked slow, just like I talk slow.
I don't talk slowly. Sometimes.
Now you're mocking me. Now you're mocking me. That's
No.
weird.
I only mock you some days of the week.
Luckily, not Tuesdays.
I didn't specify.
Well, if you are using that as an argument, then wouldn't that imply that Tuesday is not one of those days?
No.
You said no. I only mock you some days of the week, implying that those days were other days.
You little narcissist, assuming all I do on a day that I'm mocking you is mocking you, that I can't decide. Perhaps in that moment I decided
Then why
not
would
to mock you.
Then why would you need to use the day of the week argument as argument? Why would you need that? Why would it be relevant to
because it's
your
very
point?
clearly sets you off a bit. Constructive derailment.
I don't like this.
All right. Where were we going with the dates?
We were still talking. We were talking about your view of dating, the level of commitment involved in it. Mm.
Deep breath. We just go. Inhale. That's where we get our knowledge. We just inhale it.
Yes.
Have you ever drank a book? It's still no. That sounds horrible. So I like the definition of using date as a tool, because that works on the level of a very base first time getting to know them, or even an unknown level, but also can apply post engagement with the highest levels of commitment. And at that point, it's a method through which you can increase your intimacy. So, and this is why you can go on a date with someone but not be dating them.
Yeah. Or
usually you end up.
Or especially in the very early stages, it can be used as that deliberative tool to determine, is this something that I could grow into something more?
Because you have much more control at the beginning of a relationship as to if they like you or not. Once you get into the levels of high intimacy, they know everything about you, so there's nothing to hide, or at least they should. There's nothing to hide, and thus it's gone. The clause was there and it was gone now. Sorry. It was a good one. I'm sorry. I'll fish it out later.
Quite sad.
Big sad. So what are your thoughts on that? To pose a large question.
On the use of dating as a tool? Yeah. That's good.
Do you think that's accurate?
That's a really good one. I'm getting there. I'm really running out of brain.
I think this is an excellent point to leave it cut off.
Yeah.
And we'll come back to this one.
Yep.
This is something I'm probably going to go home and think about.
Yeah, and we need to have a conversation privately before.
We'll go on a romantic engagement. in which we can increase our intimacy.
And deliberate as to whether or not this was a good idea.
Now, hold on. I wonder... We spoke before about the idea of shared trauma increasing bonds between people. Can something like a war be a date? Because it's increasing the intimacy between perhaps the brethren of the soldiers. Because we didn't discuss...
Well,
this doesn't have to be in strictly one type of love. It can be philia, it can be storge, it can be all of them.
But isn't a date a deliberative tool that you intentionally put yourself in? You either ask someone on a date or say yes to a date. You do not say yes to a war.
Yes.
Unless you
started them. But you can certainly sign up for the war, or in cases of shared trauma or shared challenge, it's not necessarily you're deciding to do it, but rather you're deciding to persist together.
Okay.
Through it.
But again, I would say that is not the purpose of war.
No, the purpose of war is not to go on a... No.
Yeah.
So why'd you go to war? Oh, it's just a big date.
Yeah. We should stop.
We should stop.
You're trying to have me make connections when we're this far into it.
All right, let's end this. Don't yawn at me. Well, thank you all for attending another one of our podcasts, which we might even call a romantic engagement, because it increased the intimacy in our discussion.
Certainly.
I'm sorry, I'm going to keep saying that forever now.
Oh, yeah. That has to be on the t-shirt then.
That's going to... Speaking of which, great segue, Luke.
T-shirt, go buy them.
I love the energy.
I had so much energy. You even commented on how chipper I was when you got here.
I came in and Luke was skipping around as he sets up the mics and such. I'm like, dude, chill. But thank you all for listening. Check out the t-shirts if you haven't already. It's a little late for Christmas, but you can certainly get them for the new year and all the different holidays that will come with 2021. And when we finally are allowed to go outside again and see other individuals, you can rock your cool shirt. They're very comfortable, and in the winter season, they'll be very warm because they're black.
Yes.
My name is Andrew.
My name is Luke, and this has been the Two Existential Dudes podcast. Adios, people.